Thank you for joining us and welcome to episode number 4 of this series. My name is Benjamin Brain. I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes or so, and this is the truth about business. Welcome to the truth about business, where it's my mission to seek out real-life business champions to explore and share their challenges, setbacks, failures and triumphs to serve as inspiration, motivation and hopefully save you from some perspiration. So today's guest is Sarah Moore, founder and co-director of the Derby-based business Juggling Octopus. Sarah and her team provide tailored remote support to businesses, taking care of the projects, tasks and general work that business owners don't know how to do, don't have the time to do or simply just don't want to do. Having spent a number of years in the fast-paced and high-pressure corporate world of London, Sarah decided that it was time to take control of her own destiny, and she launched her business Juggling Octopus from scratch in January 2018. 20 months on, and the business is growing from strength to strength, providing a number of tailor-made and high-quality solutions which are enabling businesses from all over the UK to focus on what matters and help them reach their full potential. Now, this was another great wide-ranging conversation where we covered all kinds of things, including how Sarah managed to get the business off the ground, top tips for hiring remote workers, some of the many lessons she's learned along the way, and much, much more. You know, success leaves footprints. So let's take a walk with local entrepreneur and co-director and founder of Juggling Octopus, Sarah Moore. Sarah, thank you for joining us on The Truth About Business. Really good to have you on the show. We'll get straight into it. The name Juggling Octopus, where did it come from?
Thanks for having me. Juggling Octopus, I wanted something different, and I definitely didn't want a business that was called SJM or something that was dull and plain. And played around with some ideas, had a look online, and I must admit I found the octopus pendant. And that was kind of it. So there's nothing exciting or nothing very technical. But and certainly when I first chose it, lots of people sort of weren't so sure, but I liked it from day one. And I guess that's important to me. But also as time's gone on, I love the fact that people say, oh, you're a juggling octopus, I know what you do. It tells me what you do. So yeah, it's a name that we like. And okay. It works for us.
Makes sense, most definitely. So we'll take it back to the very early years then. Did you show any entrepreneurial flair as a child?
I couldn't stop laughing when I read this. No. It's the simplest answer in the world. No. I have a family of teachers. I grew up thinking I'd be a teacher or a lawyer and following in their steps, and it wasn't even something I thought about.
Okay. And so when did that desire first come to be a business owner?
And so I think when I thought about this, I always give 100%. And the jobs I've done, I've always loved. So I worked at McDonald's, and within 3 months, I wanted to be a manager and wanted to run the business. And I worked at Staples, and the same thing. I went on a Saturday job and actually wanted to progress and wanted to be a team leader. And I always wanted to give my most. And as I got older, what I sort of found was that actually I'd give 100% and I wasn't getting the outcomes. And it made me start to realise that I can give an awful lot, and it would be amazing at some point in my life to actually get the benefit of that and to be able to do it for myself.
Okay, so that drive to excel in the roles that you were in when you were employed, can you pinpoint where that came from? Was that example shown by parents, or do you think it was just a part of you from the start?
I don't know. I mean, my mum and dad are both extremely hardworking, very different people, but certainly that, always commit and always do your best. It's absolutely part of how I was brought up. But I suspect one of the things for me, when I worked at McDonald's, I had a fantastic manager and a manager who wasn't so good. And it really taught me a lot about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And it was really interesting seeing two people at the same time who were just such polar opposites. And one of them was so driven and worked so hard. And I was like, that's what I want to be. So I suspect that was probably where a lot of it came from.
Okay. And can you pinpoint a particular trigger moment back in your career when you thought, right, no, this is it. I'm going to be my own boss now. I'm going to run my own business. Was there an event that happened or something that set it off?
I think my health has been key. I have suffered with ill health in the past. It's not a secret. I've had 2 breakdowns. And so I sort of realised that I wanted to do something for myself and be able to control my work-life balance. And I had quite a difficult period of time down in London, and it just made me realise that the corporate world wasn't for me and it was time to do something So I was really lucky, actually. It was a tough time, but it was a real positive to find from it. And I was very lucky to have the support around me to be able to say, well, why not? You know, and to give it a go. So, yeah, ill health is tough and it affects a huge amount of people. But for me, it's been a real opportunity to make changes that I might not have done otherwise.
And you managed to turn that into a positive.
And I think that's probably one of my things. Life can be tough, and I try and find the positives. So, yeah, ill health is what it is. But to have what I've got now off the back of it makes it worthwhile.
Wow, amazing. So Juggling Octopus, we've already talked a little bit about the type of services that you provide. How did you identify there was a need for that service to begin with? Where did the idea come from? Okay,
so to step back a little bit, it was as much about finding out what I didn't want to do or what I couldn't do. And I had a business about 4 years ago creating button pictures, which is as awful as it sounds. But it seemed a good idea at the time.
I've got a couple of button pictures myself, so...
See, there is someone that likes them. It was worthwhile.
I probably bought one from you. I just don't know it yet.
No one did.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time thinking of this idea, too much time planning. And the story I always tell is that I exhibited at a craft fair and the marquee got burgled on the Saturday night. And I was the only one that wasn't even good enough to be burgled. Oh, wow. Everybody else had stock stolen except for me. So when I came setting up this business, what I realised was that it needed to be something that A, would pay the mortgage, and B, was something that I could do. It wasn't about reinventing the wheel. It wasn't about stepping outside of comfort zones. It was about saying, what am I good at? And what's the need for out there? And I'm very organised, very focused on admin. I've always been very good at that kind of thing. And when I looked around at I was lucky enough to have time to set the business up and to think it through. And when I looked around, the idea of the VA role, the virtual assistant, remote working seemed really interesting. But what I wanted to do was look at how I could sort of almost scale that up and commercialise it. And as opposed to something quite small based on my own, how could I take that concept and what I was good at and build something with a foundation that could then become much bigger over time.
And so talk to us a bit about the series of events that led up to the launch of Juggling Octopus from the point of you having that initial idea of, right, okay, I'm interested in this VA scene, I think I'll be able to do something here, I've got the skills to match it, to, right, I'm Sarah, this is my business, Juggling Octopus.
Okay, so it was an interesting time. There was sort of lots going on in my personal life. I was setting up the business at the same time and there was lots of distractions, and I really wasn't 100% focused on Juggling Octopus for a few months. And then change happened, things changed in my personal life, and it really made me sort of stand back. And it was, another not so good situation to find a positive from. And at that point, I decided if I was going to do it properly or not at all. So I gave myself time frames. I'm a list maker. I make lists every day, try and stick to them sometimes. And so at that point, it was a case of saying, this is what I need to do to bring this to life, but learn from the past, don't overplan. 6 months planning buttons to not sell anything is not a great use of time. Better to get something out there and refine it later. So I set myself a sort of 3-month deadline, used my friends and family. They were fantastic. Every other day there was a WhatsApp or a phone call asking for advice and what did people think, so I could refine and change things. Time spent with my dad building the website was fantastic to be able to do. And then it just got to the point where I just had to do it. Stop faffing around and actually press the button and launch the business.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that spend so much time on planning the business and setting it up and making it look nice and fancy and getting all the stationery right, but when it comes to actually pulling the trigger and getting yourself out there and launching as a business, that's when the fear sets in and holds you back and you're back to the day job. So what do you think the difference is between the people that say, yeah, I've invested in this now, I'm going to bite the bullet and go for it, and those that perhaps get the doubts and pull away?
I think fear's a good thing. I think for me, fear was a huge factor because I had to do it. I needed to pay the mortgage at some point and the savings were going to run out. I think a lot of people don't actually want more than a hobby business or a lifestyle business, and that's fine. But I think it's about recognizing what do you actually want from something. And if you just want a hobby and you enjoy doing the planning, then keep the day job and do the planning on the side. And I think there's almost pressure nowadays. There's so many entrepreneurs, there's so many business owners. It's almost looked down on to do something small, but why? I wanted to do something that would provide for me and provide a business and a lifestyle and more than that, in a career. And so I had to go for it. And what's the worst that could ever happen?
And did you have any doubts once you'd made that commitment to, right, I'm going to go for this? Did you have any doubts up to that time? Were there any times where you thought, I can't do this?
No, I'm so lucky. Once I'd decided what I wanted to do, then it was just a case of putting it in place. I'm not scared to change it. I'm not scared to evolve it. I'm not scared to learn and to do things differently. But once I decided that this was what I was going to do, that's been it. And I've loved nearly every day. Nearly.
So you had that belief in yourself.
Yeah.
Do you think that's important for an entrepreneur or somebody that's thinking of starting a business?
Anybody.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's wonderful to, I get my friends and family, as I say, are so supportive. My clients are amazing. People say lovely things. But it's important that I believe in myself first, because that comes across. And I think that comes across in how I portray the octopus to other people. And if I don't believe in it, how can I ask them to believe in me and the business?
Okay. You've gone through the point of creating it. You've spent time with your dad building the website. You know this is you now. You've got belief in yourself. How did day one feel? Can you remember what it was like?
Such an anticlimax. I didn't really have a day one,
okay.
In that whilst I was going through setting up the website, looking at exactly what services to offer, because it's not a specific service or one specific thing that we do, a couple of friends knew that I was setting up and asked me if I could do some work for them. So I was already doing a couple of bits on the side. However, I guess I tend to think of day one as the day when I actually reached out on Facebook and said, this is what I'm doing. Does anybody know anyone that would like any work doing? And it took me ages to press that button. I wrote the post and I sat and looked at it and I went for a walk, and I guess that's when it felt real.
Yeah.
And it makes me smile thinking about it, because I guess it makes me realise how far things have come.
How did it feel once you'd pressed the button?
Fantastic. Just good, because it was almost a tick in the box that the first stage of the business was done in terms of, okay, I'm ready now, and it might not be right, but here you go, world. What do you think?
Okay. And so with the line of business that you're in, there's obviously a variety of services that you could provide. How did you decide on the services that you were going to provide from day one? Did you go in with a big list of things that you can do, or did you make it more of a sort of specific area?
It's always been a case of doing the things that people don't know how to do, have time to do, or want to do. And we don't narrow that down, and I didn't narrow that down from day one.
Okay.
However, what I've never been comfortable doing, I guess, is doing something that I can't do well. The reality is that most of what we do isn't rocket science at all, but it's helping other business owners who just don't have time or just don't want to do something, and getting it done for them so they can grow their business. So when someone approaches me and asks for support, it's about understanding why they need it and what they need, and whether I can do that to the right level. And if I can, fantastic, and if not, I'll tell people. But I've never really kind of cut things off and said, I won't do this or I won't do that. There's a couple of services that I don't believe we're so good at, and we may look at those in the future or we may not. But in general, the work we do isn't tied down. We don't limit ourselves. It's around what our clients need and want.
Okay, so very customizable to the needs of each individual client. So we've talked about the first day you were waiting to press that button to launch the post on Facebook. How did you find your first client? Was it through the Facebook advert?
Through the Facebook advert.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. And within 10 minutes, I had a message from someone I'd not spoken to down in Brighton, and I'd probably not spoken to her for about 5 years. Didn't know she was running her own business, and she just said, actually, I could do with some help.
And that managed to reach her all the way down in Brighton?
And that reached her down in Brighton. So I got in my car at 4:00 in the morning, a couple of days later, went down to see her, spent a couple of hours there, understanding her business, understanding what she needed. And it wasn't a huge contract, but it was great. And it was helping someone. It was really exciting.
And you got the ball rolling?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that first 12 months, how did it go compared to what you would planned it to go, or how you thought it would go?
It went off on multiple tangents. I had opportunities that presented themselves to me that I never expected, that seemed like they were going to make me a millionaire in 12 months and surprisingly nearly bankrupt me instead. And it was about learning from them. I think I tried in the first 12 months to kind of roll with it and to see what happened. And if someone asked me to do something, think carefully about whether it was the right thing. I learned in the first 12 months to say no. saying yes to every project you're offered isn't always a good idea.
Yeah.
And if you can't do something or it's not the right thing, then say no. But I'm still here. I was still there after 12 months, which is good. I didn't expect to have a business partner, but that's been one of the best things I did.
Okay.
I had initially, my idea had been around having remote staff, and that didn't really work for me for a number of reasons. So I have a team in the office instead, which is fantastic. So in terms of where I thought I'd be, I don't know that I'd set in stone. I have a focus, but it's not. I don't tie it down because so much can change at the moment, and I needed to learn every day, and to be able to evolve it without being tied to a specific goal.
So you've talked about some interesting things there during that first 12 months. There was the fact that it's important to say no, which I'd like to touch on, and also those opportunities which they seem like they were going to end up making you a multimillionaire, but went the opposite way. So to begin with, how do you tell a client no, and how do they take it?
I think it's all about transparency and honesty. And it ties into the clients that didn't work. And I was very lucky and offered some sales work very early on in the business when it was just myself. Really interesting project, great client, lovely people, but it wasn't right for me. And the way the project was set up didn't suit my business. And so I tried it for about a month. I gave it time. I tried to bed it in, but I was honest throughout that month that I had concerns. And at the end of it, I just said, I spoke to the people in concerned and just said it doesn't work for me, and thank you for the opportunity, but I'd like to step away. And it was the biggest relief once I'd done it. And funnily enough, within a week I had 2 new clients, and actually the person that I said no to came back to me 3 or 4 months later and referred someone who turned out to be a huge opportunity. So I think saying no is just as important as saying yes, but do it in the right way with honesty and integrity and a reason.
Great tips. And so with regards to the other part of that question, the opportunities which seem like they're going to be a good thing but turn out to be a bad thing, how do you decide which opportunities are worth taking up now? Do you have a particular set of rules that you're looking for, or a checklist?
I have a business partner. I have Beth to tell me when to calm down and to remind me to stop trying to do everything at once. I think it's as much about being slightly more cautious, particularly now I've got the team and it's not just me. It's about really understanding what's involved in an opportunity and making sure that whatever's agreed is written down as well. There's been some interesting learnings around that as well.
Okay. Always have something in writing.
Always have something in writing. And that's not a bad comment on anybody, myself or anybody else, but that way everything's clear and there can't be any misunderstandings.
It's good for both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What was your biggest challenge for this first 12 months? Was there anything in particular that stands out?
The sales calling was tough. The initial sales calling was tough, but being able to say no kind of relieved that issue. Recruitment and just working out how that would look. When I started this kind of model of having remote workers, at one point I had sort of 10 people on the books, fantastic people who did some great work, but I'd set it up in far too flexible a fashion, and it was very time consuming, and I tried to fit them. And that was a real challenge. It just didn't work. And I wasn't servicing the clients in the right way. It was very ineffective from a cost perspective. And it was the first time I think I had to sit down and say, right, hang on a minute, this doesn't work. What do I need? What am I going to do about it? What do I need to do differently? So big challenges, but nothing insurmountable. And
so at what point did you bring on your first full-time employee?
So Beth came on board initially not as a business partner, but almost as an administrative support to look after these remote workers. And from day one, it was amazing having somebody else in the office with me. It was a sounding board, it was someone to celebrate with, it was someone to commiserate with, which was fantastic. What was really sort of tough for her as well, and what was interesting, was when I decided that the remote worker side of things didn't work, almost the role that I'd offered her disappeared. And the business and I are very lucky that Beth then kind of stepped up and just became part of Juggling Octopus. And that changed the business hugely and really allowed it to grow, which is fantastic.
And so with a business that offers so many different types of services, as we've talked about, to serve the individual needs of each customer, what are some of the attributes that you look for in new employees and people that you look to bring on board? Are there any particular skill sets that you look for, or is it more attitude?
Attitude. It's got to be a can-do attitude. It's got to be someone that has professionalism and cares. But I'm always looking for someone that's better than me and someone that can teach me something and someone that brings something new to the table. We have a girl that started with us quite recently who has amazing photography and videography skills that we're now being able to put to use that we hadn't even dreamed of 2 months ago. I think it's anyone that wants to grow and be part of the journey has potentially a place within Octopus, but we don't close the door on anything. We want to look at why people want to be involved. And if someone isn't right, then we're not, but then we'll be honest again and say, no, that's not right for us. But when we do recruitment, we look at what they bring. And it's exciting to see the new stuff and to look at how the group dynamic changes with the different staff we've got and the different age ranges and the different skill sets and backgrounds, because it all makes Octopus a much stronger business.
And how many people do you have on the team right now?
There are 6 of us at the moment. I'm in the office. And then we have 2 freelancers who are incredibly skilled sales callers who have just got a huge amount of experience, and they work from home supporting us.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's a huge industry with freelancers now. What would be some of the, maybe if you could pick 2 or 3 tips for somebody who is looking to grow the team but is looking to grow it remotely in terms of managing remote workers and freelance workers? Is there anything in particular that you've learned from your own experience?
I think it's key to set out the boundaries. When someone's in the office and I ask them to do something, it's quite easy to realise if they're not doing what I envisaged it would look like. When somebody's remote, if I leave them to it for 8 hours and then I get the results and that they've gone off on a tangent, it could well be my fault, but it could be that I've wasted their time and mine. So what I try now is that whatever project we give our guys, it's something that we talk through and that we're clear on what we're looking to do and that we touch base. We use timesheets. We're very sort of transparent in the way we work, but we make sure that everybody understands, and that if I've got a freelancer doing something for the first time, one of us needs to be available to take a call if need be to explain or go through it. It's a great opportunity to grow my business without the pressure of having a full-time or an employee. It just, for us, needs to be managed in the right way. And just as well making sure, trying to make them feel part of the team, trying to engage them and let them know in what's going on in the office.
Yeah, I can
really
imagine
key.
They can feel quite often like they're just left out on
Yeah,
their own,
exactly.
being remote and not being in the office environment with everybody else.
And some people want that. I think it's recognising what people want.
Yeah.
Some people actually choose to be freelance because they don't want to be part of the office. They don't want that engagement. They don't want the commute. They're incredibly good at what they do and want to do it a few hours a day or week for whatever reason. And that's really what we're looking to harness and to work with.
Great tips. So before you started Juggling Octopus and from your past career, were there any experiences or skills that you picked up from those roles that you think have contributed towards the success of Juggling Octopus?
I think I try to learn from everything I've seen. And so going back to McDonald's, going back to bar work, there's always something to take from it. There's always skills to learn, be it time management, be it being polite, be it organisational skills. The basics are just as important as any of the skills that I've been lucky enough to learn sort of through management training and whatnot. Specifically though, I think I've been very lucky. The corporate career that I had taught me a huge amount in terms of how to manage teams, how to manage time, how to manage clients. And I think that's been really key to the way we can structure the business, because we don't do anything that's rocket science. It's about doing what we do incredibly well and to the highest standard each and every time. And that kind of consistency and that kind of approach is ingrained in me from the work I've done previously.
Yeah, McDonald's is always looked up to as the king of the sort of franchise model, where you could walk into a McDonald's in London or Singapore and your Big Mac is going to be served in exactly the same way. And I suppose with the work that you do, when the clients worked for you for the first time, they might be working with somebody, they come back 6 months later, they might be working with somebody else. They still expect that same consistent level of quality.
Absolutely key to what we want to do looking forward, and for this business to be a success, somebody needs to know that if they recommend a friend in Timbuktu to Juggling Octopus for the same kind of service, that they'll get the same kind of results.
Yeah, and so you've obviously very clearly got high expectations of yourself and the work that you provide for your clients. Was there a challenge in first letting some of that go to have other people do it for you, and how did that feel?
Yes, there was, but I worked for a business about 10 years ago, a small business in Brighton, an amazing opportunity to work with a small business owner who was just starting to take on staff. And I went down there to help initially and to help grow the business, but then to run the staff side of things. And unfortunately, the business didn't work out. And we still talk, but one of the main reasons, and my friend, my peer will acknowledge, is that he didn't delegate. And it was a really key learning for me, even a long time ago, that if I ever did something, that it could never be as big as I envisaged if I didn't share. And that also, the minute you start to delegate, people buy into what you do. So the minute I let somebody, or I ask somebody for help or their way of doing something, A, it could be far better than the way I was going to do it. B, they then are engaged in the business, and that then gives a service level or a commitment that makes the whole team stronger. So delegation, you can't grow a business in my book without delegating.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, because I think for a lot of business owners, the reason they start their own business is because they are control freaks, for want of a better phrase.
Definitely.
But then, as you say, to be able to grow it, you've got to let go of that and delegate. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck in the mud.
And yet, on the other side, there is no prouder feeling than looking at what the team can achieve without me. Having had a month out recently, to be able to watch the business keep going forwards, to flourish, for new customers to come on, I'm not indispensable. And it's amazing to see that when you do delegate, just the results that you can get. And so they may not be the results you expected either, but if you don't try, you will never get past a certain point.
Yeah. For Juggling Octopus, what sort of businesses are your competition? Is there competition? And if there is, how do you separate yourself?
There is competition. The virtual assistant market is growing and is huge. It's primarily tends to be one-man bands. In the main, it's a lot of people with huge amounts, for example, of admin experience who have then started working on their own and offer this kind of remote support. The big challenge for us is that a lot of businesses still don't understand what remote working is, don't utilise it. We're talking more and more about agile working, people working from home and that kind of opportunity, but it's not a norm yet. And so any competition that is out there is great for us, in the same way that if you're Costa and there's a Starbucks down the road, people are at least talking about coffee. There's enough work to go around for everyone. And so what we do and the service levels that we provide stand us out from our competition. You know, I go back to it and I have no problem in repeating what we do isn't normally rocket science, but it's the way we do it. And that's why we keep our clients. And so the competition simply gives almost, lets other people know that remote working's out there.
Okay, that's a good way of looking at it, most definitely. So at Juggling Octopus, you've got a clearly defined vision, and I know because I've been in the office and I've seen it up on the wall. You've clearly got a mission and some company values and a culture that you're purposefully trying to create and nurture and continue as you grow. What are some of the things that you do to keep the team focused on those, and what sort of advantages do you feel it brings to a business, particularly in the earlier stages?
I think there's two bits to it. It goes back to what we said earlier. You can spend too long planning, and having a vision, mission and culture on day one wasn't necessary. It was in my head, there was only me there. Having a fancy bit of paper was just more time wasted and not getting clients on board. However, as I started to grow and started to move towards more clients and needing more staff, having that vision, mission and culture, if the team don't buy into it, then they're not the right people for the team. And so it's really important, because it's tough in the first, in the early stages. The team work long hours and they're fantastic. And understanding and buying into why we do it and what the mission is and what we're trying to achieve and what the end goals are is really important. We talk about it constantly. We have I try really hard to have a sort of a feeling of transparency in the office. So we have a morning meeting every morning. We look at what we're going to do for the day. We look at when we celebrate when new clients come on board. We celebrate why and what they're going to be doing. We go through one-to-ones every week. We have a huddle every week and we reflect and say, okay, so what was good this week? What was the biggest challenge for the business? How do we learn from that so it disappears or is less next week? Who's our employee of the week? And all of that for me is about bringing to life the culture and to making sure that that's how we run the business, because that way it kind of keeps us on track and keeps us honest.
So I suppose the message there is, to begin with, don't get bogged down with the mission and the values and planning them all out. The first focus is to actually get the business up and running and get some proof that it works. And then when you're starting to bring on team members, then look to define it on paper so that you can bring on people who are of not the same ilk, but in a similar frame of mind to you.
Yeah, I think Absolutely. If you do too much on day one and then the business doesn't work anyway, then what's the point? You've got to have an idea in your head to make sure that everything you do is almost sort of signposted. But absolutely, now as we grow, I don't need people that are sort of that are similar to me. I actually want people that are different, because everyone that's different brings something new to the party, something new to the table, and that's really exciting. And our clients are all different, so the more variety and variation we have in the team, the more we can slot to our specific client needs. However, we all fit within the same framework.
Okay, nicely put. And so what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned so far about recruiting new team members?
Recruitment's tough, and it takes forever, and it's really hard, and it's hard for everyone. So it's one of those things. I think one of the biggest things that we learn is the job description needs to be honest. If the job is tough, tell people. If you need people to do sales calling, then it needs to say so in the job description, because it's not fair to put something out there that's very nicey and then interview them and give someone a heart attack.
Yeah, they're going to find out.
They're going to find out, yeah. It's going to become clear relatively quickly. The other thing for us is, if something doesn't feel right, go with your gut instinct. We've had some interesting situations whereby something felt right at interview, and actually before somebody even came on board, it was quite clearly the wrong decision. But we even at interview, there were niggles, and if I'd gone with my gut instinct, it would probably have saved me a little bit of time.
And if you could narrow that down, I'm going to put you on the spot here, into, again, 2 or 3 top tips for a first-time business owner, entrepreneur in the early days. They're looking to bring on board the first full-time permanent member of staff. What would be some of the key tips that you'd give to them?
It's got to be someone you can get on with. You're going to spend an awful lot of time with them. And, you know, when Beth first came on board, there'd be things to talk about on a Saturday. There'd be things to talk about at 7 in the morning. There were things to discuss at 10 o'clock at night. Thankfully, she has a very understanding husband, and we that was fine. But it's key that you get along with the person that you're going to work with. Think about what they add to the business. Not are they like you, but why are they different from you, and how does that benefit the business? Because that's really important. And then if someone doesn't seem right, as I say, then they're not right. If you're not sure, move away. Find the person that's going to help your business, because this is your baby. And don't just share it with anybody. Find the right person. And
you obviously got it right for the first time, because your first employee, Beth, has now turned out to be your partner as well.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
So you've been you've got an interesting perspective there. You've been a solo business owner, and you've also been a business owner as a duo as well. What are some of the advantages of being a solo business owner? This is your business.
I guess the obvious ones are that you just do it. Just get on with it. Just do it. You don't need to check with somebody. That in itself is also the downside, because actually checking with somebody is a huge benefit. I don't miss it. I was always, I suppose one of the advantages, it was all mine. You know, that kind of egomaniac side, when it's my solo business, it's all mine and I can pat myself on the back, and that's great. But that wasn't why I wanted to do it. And I've never been worried about sharing the business and sharing where we're going with it. So the advantages of being a sort of a solo business owner aren't that much for me. I think everyone's different. For some people, it's really important, and they want to keep that real tight focus on the business. But that was never part of what I wanted to achieve.
Okay, so you've recently moved with the team to a larger office. How exciting has that been in the journey so far for Juggling Octopus? Well,
I like exciting. I get excited every day about the small things, and I think that's important. But yeah, moving to a larger office is definitely one of the big exciting things. The office at Badger Farm was fantastic, and it really helped to professionalise the business.
Can you just give us a bit of a description of what your previous office was?
Previous office that we had was the Gatehouse at Badger Farm in Hilton. And so it was an absolutely tiny little building that you would see as you drove past Badger Farm.
Yes,
that had been previously used as a sort of stock room. And we had the opportunity, we were very lucky, and Stuart gave us an opportunity to turn that into an office for Beth and I last December. And it was fantastic, and it was our own space, and it was wonderful to make Octopus kind of come alive, if you like. And it was a real sort of big tick in the box for the business, but it was never, unfortunately, going to be big enough for anybody else. There wasn't really much room for 2 of us, and desks and computers, let alone anything else. So we always had to move, and we were lucky enough to have known the property manager that worked with Badger Farm. And once we decided it was something we needed to do, it was a case of, right, let's get on with it. And we saw a number of properties that just weren't Octopus. And I think it's really important when you have an office, that it represents what you need it to say. We wanted something that was fun, something that was quite modern, something that was fresh, something that had enough space to grow, because we were never planning on staying as two for long, something with lots of light, and something that was a nice place to come to work. And I think that's really what we've achieved. It's a wonderful space, and it's a pleasure to work in there.
And so where are you now?
So now we're at 32 Friegate. So it's a great location, and we've been there for 3.5 months and love it. It's great.
And what were some of the challenges in finding a new office that matched all those criteria that would make it Juggling Octopus headquarters?
I think it's finding the right place. There's actually quite a lot in Derby, which is great, and it's wonderful to see how much opportunity there is in Derby to fit lots of different business types. We also were relatively tight on budget, which was a real challenge for us, and it was great to be able to work with the team at 32 Friegate to make what we've got happen. But we just again needed to be honest and say what's right and not jump too quickly. If something wasn't right, like with the recruitment, do what's right and make the right decisions. So look around, reflect on it, and then move forwards.
Okay, so think long term rather than short term.
Yeah, absolutely. We love what we've got, and we needed to make sure it was the right space for us.
And you're loving it now?
Love it.
So it was worth waiting for?
Definitely.
Okay, so Juggling Octopus, you're obviously very focused on helping business owners to save time that allows them to focus on what actually matters, which you'd like to think as a business owner is growing the business. From your experience of all the business owners that you're working with so far, do you think entrepreneurs and business owners realise how precious their time is?
I don't think people do generally. I don't think it's about entrepreneurs. I think that question applies to most people. People just don't realise how lucky they are to have time or to do what they want to do. And so one of our sort of key challenges, if you like, is to try to bring that to life for clients. What would you do if you had more time? If we could give you 2 hours, what would you do with that? How would you spend it? Because everyone can think of something that will make them smile, and that they could spend their time doing, whatever that might be: friends, family, travel, gym, relaxation. But I think that most people nowadays are time poor and don't even realise it. We run around, and it's really important to take the time to stop, and that's what we allow people to do.
Yeah, and I suppose the old cliche, particularly on the entrepreneurial business side, is as an owner or somebody at the top of the chain, so to speak, is to work on the business rather than in the business. And that's obviously what you guys help to accommodate that by taking away the things that people don't like to do and perhaps aren't capable of doing, so they can focus the time on growing the business. What are some of the other mistakes that you see from a business perspective from the other businesses that you work with that hold them back?
I think it comes back that we've mentioned it already, but that just going for it. I see lots of people who are incredibly good planners and perhaps aren't quite so good at doing, and that actually it's okay to just do it and to try. I think when you take that attitude, you've got to be prepared to make mistakes, and therefore you've got to be prepared to apologise and to rectify them. But sometimes you've just got to step off that cliff and you've just got to go for it. Business owners that don't say no, again, looking at what we've already talked about, if something isn't right, don't do it. If it's not right for you, that's fine. It doesn't have to be. And delegating. We do quite a lot of work for clients who find it tough to hand things over, particularly when we're remote, particularly because they can't see what we're doing. And so it's all about building that trust and building that relationship with them, so that over the time we build that slowly, that not many business owners would be comfortable in handing everything over to us on day one. But we're quite happy to do it a little bit at a time, learn about the business, become part of who they are, and learn about how they work, so that this kind of fear of delegation that people have almost disappears, almost doesn't become an issue anymore, because we become part of who they are. So we kind of try to recognise these issues and work with our clients so that it just becomes part of the process.
And so we've already talked about you've made the move to Friegate, you're loving the new offices, but in the conversation that we had before we started this interview, you've already mentioned that you've got plans in place potentially to make another move in the not too distant future, which obviously means the team's growing, the business growing, which is amazing. What do you put some of that quick growth down to?
I think the key is having the right foundations. If you don't have the right foundations in place, then anyone can grow fast, but they'll fall over. What we've tried to do, and some of the things we learned from in year one, was this kind of running isn't always the answer. But what we've tried to do now is make sure that we have a really clear process in place. That idea of the McDonald's, that idea of having the templates and the same processes that are already there. What that now means is that the time that's been spent on putting all these foundations in place can be spent talking to people, understanding their challenges and bringing on new business. And that allows us to grow more quickly while still making sure that it doesn't compromise anything we do for any of the clients we already work with.
Yeah, and I think those foundations that are so important that you've just talked about, the checklists and the processes, it's those things that people find hard to commit the time to because you're so busy with the daily what goings on of the business. But actually, if you can commit the time to them, it will, in the long term, as we've talked about, long term over short term, help you to grow far quicker, continue to deliver the same consistent levels of service, and ultimately is time well served.
And I think as well, if you've got a process in place, we talked about the difficulty of delegation. If everything's a process that's been bought into by the whole team, then the sort of this idea of delegating becomes less difficult because everyone's following the same process anyway. It doesn't matter whether it's me or someone else that does it. We're all setting out to do the same thing and get the same results.
And describe how you go about, just for picking one process, for example, what's the sort of journey from saying, okay, we've got this process, to having it documented and ready for access for somebody else?
So what we will try to do, if I take, for example, if we take on a new client and we have a new process that they ask us to do, we will try and learn from them and we will mimic what they do. We will then write it down as we see and send it back and check it and make sure and get it signed off. And then one of the first things we'll do is pass that to somebody else to do. Pass that to another team member and say, right, can you follow this?
And is that just a Microsoft Word document, or is it
we
actually
keep it
physically
simple.
handwritten?
No,
or?
just a Word document. Sometimes it's got screenshots. It depends on what it is.
Yeah.
I think we don't overplan. It doesn't need to be particularly pretty at this stage. We just need to know what are all the steps that need to be involved in that process, and can somebody else pick it up and follow it. Mm-hmm. And it's something we didn't do perhaps as well for quite a long time, but we're getting lots better at it. But what it's actually meaning is it's giving our clients that kind of confidence that it doesn't matter who does your work, it will always be done in the right way.
Yeah, and you haven't need to go out and invest in fancy software for that. Like you say, you've kept it simple, Word document, save it on the computer and anybody else can access it.
If there is fancy software out there that's free and does it for me, fantastic. But you know what? Microsoft Word's great.
Yeah,
and you just don't need to overthink
Shiny
it.
object syndrome is not needed. Okay, now going to looking at your social media history, you've been clearly an avid reader of business books. What's the motivation behind that, and do you think that served your current success in business well?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we talked about what skills have I got from my previous roles and my experiences, and the point there for me was everything is something to learn, and reading is just that. I love reading anyway. Every book you read, I try and take something from it. So the way I go through a business book is I'll have 10 paperclips and I'll paperclip the 10 pages that mean the most to me. And when I run out of paperclips, I have to think if it's worth taking one off.
Ah, good idea.
But the reason I do that is because otherwise I read it and forget what's in it. Yeah. What's the point? So if I'm going to read it, try and take something away from it. But it's just about making myself better. There's so much to learn. I'm never going to know it all. Running a business is so new to me still, that why wouldn't I learn from people who've been there and done it? And mimicry is a great way of doing things. And I don't sort of apologise for that. It's important. If someone's very good at something, look at how they do it and see if that's something that you could do yourself.
Success leaves footprints, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and so I can see that at one point you were trying to get down to the 52 books in 52 weeks, which I've tried 12 in 12 weeks, and that was a phenomenal effort. I only just about managed it with some heavy last minute reading on the last few days. So how's that gone for you?
Not well. And there were some very short books. There were some very short books in that list. Yeah, absolutely. I can't read anymore. Do you know what? It's a great idea and it's something I'd like to finish. I love the idea of doing something with that once I've read the 52 books and how other people could benefit from that. But if I haven't got time for something, then I haven't got time. Yeah. I am not going to beat myself up. Work-life balance is key. Business, I'm very grateful, is much busier than it was 12 months ago when I had this fanciful idea. And so I've just sort of rolled with it. I will go back to it, but I'm not going to beat myself up in the meantime. Yeah. And when I get time, I shall read some more.
So you're not putting too much pressure on yourself to make that happen. There's more important things that come up in between.
There is just no need to put pressure on yourself. I just think there is so much that has to be done then do the other stuff that you enjoy.
It takes the enjoyment away from it as well,
Definitely.
doesn't it? If you feel that it's something that you've got to do and you can't just sit back and relax and read a few pages, then...
I liked the pressure, and I liked the idea, and I love the idea of reading this sort of business book a week and making sure that I take something from it, but it just doesn't fit. I'm very lucky to be able to say it doesn't fit into the time I have available right now.
And so from the books that you did manage to get through, was there one in particular that stood out that you had to rearrange the paper clips for the most amount of times?
The one book that stood out is Think and Grow Rich, by Napoleon Hill. Yeah. I think it blew me away that a book that was written so long ago was still so relevant. And it was at that point that I also really started to define my goals and really started to think about, okay, I don't need to be able to tell you what colour the wallpaper is. I'm not interested. I don't necessarily need to be able to tell you what my turnover is specifically or how many members of staff. But I need to have ideas and I need to have more set in place. And so since reading that book, I have a list of goals on a scrappy piece of yellow paper that are stuck up in my bathroom and that I look at every morning when I brush my teeth and every night before I go to bed. And that was maybe 8 months ago, and I still make a point of reading them every single day.
And have you managed to check any of those goals off yet?
Well, my goals are for the end of 2019. There is one which is a turnover goal, and we are heading, bearing in mind I set it in July 18.
Over a year ago. Yeah.
We should end up within 5% of the goal.
Wow. So it works.
So it works. So maybe I should have set a higher goal, but it works. And it really has kept me focused. And as a book, there were so many concepts that I read and went, yeah, I get that. Oh, okay, that's how I could think. Okay, that's interesting. And it wasn't too heavy, and it didn't talk at me or patronize me. It just gave me some really clear guidance on things to physically do. And that's what I want sometimes. Sometimes it's nice to get ideas and thought processes, but actually it was really relevant.
Yeah, and I love your paperclip idea because reading is quite a big thing now. You know, there's YouTube channels, podcasts that are just based around the reading of books. There's services that give you summaries of books so you don't have to read the whole book. But one thing that you rarely find is people that actually take the lessons from the books and implement them in their life. There's also a huge amount of information with regards to setting goals, and I think sometimes it can be so overwhelming it just puts you off doing anything about it. But from what you've done, write them down on a scrap piece of paper, stick them somewhere where you can see them before you go to sleep and see them first thing in the morning. That's all you need. And
you know what, when I'm having a great day, I look at them and I smile and I know I'm on track. And if I'm having a bad day, I look at them and know that I'll be back on track soon.
Yeah, so it's from added motivation.
Absolutely,
as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, love it. Are there any other authors or speakers or, for want of a better word, gurus that you are a particular fan of or follow online?
Not particularly. I'm a huge fan of Michelle Obama, Karen Brady, as incredibly influential women in business. Still not enough incredibly influential women in business, so that's of importance to me. Someone that I have a huge amount of respect for, Andy Bounds. I would love to meet Andy Bounds. I've not heard
of Andy Bounds.
So he wrote a book called The Snowball Effect.
Right, okay.
And it's all about communication styles, but it's wonderfully split down into small segments. How do you deal with writing an email in a more effective manner? Should you be going to more meetings? And everything is just useful. It's just the most fantastic mine of information. And you read something and you go, why have I never done that? Why don't I write my emails like that? Why don't I use this?
What's the tip with regards to emails then? Give us one snippet.
So the way that he would suggest you should look at an email is that people don't often have a call to action. And so people will send a ranting email, this is terrible, but they don't actually say what they therefore want you to do. And an email should always finish with a call to action. Please can you respond to me today? Please can you let me know this information before the end of the week? Therefore your audience knows what the expectation is. Your subject line should tell them what they're going to read. It shouldn't say FYI. It should give them something of value so that they want to open the email. There's nothing, again, no rocket science to what he says, but it just reminds you, and the content should be as concise as possible and should deliver on what the subject header says. And that works for me whether you're sending a sales email, a marketing email, whether it's something to the team, keeping it concise, a subject line that tells you what's going to happen, and a call to action at the bottom. so that you get what you want out of it.
Okay, sounds like a good read. I'll be adding that one to the
It
list.
is
So
good.
that's
Definitely.
the
Snowball Effect.
Okay, watch out for that. Okay, so going back to the business of Sarah and Juggling Octopus, what would you say has been your proudest moment so far?
I try and make sure I'm proud of the little things and all the things we go along. However, even thinking about when the signage went up at Badger Farm puts a lump in my throat.
Okay.
It was just the most incredible feeling to see my business next to businesses that have been around 30 years, and incredibly emotional for me, and really kind of just made me feel, we talked before we started doing this about sort of imposter syndrome and not feeling relevant.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time where I really felt like a business owner. And that's just an amazing feeling. It represented how proud I am that my clients refer other people, that we were big enough to need to be at Badger Farm. It represented the fact that I had Beth as a business partner and that we'd grown the business in that way. It sort of stood for so much about how we'd grown within the first 6 months, just in one symbol.
Do you have any mementos of that moment? Do you have any shots of
I have pictures, and all the signage when we left we kept. Okay. So the sign that we have at the 32 Friargate is the one we took from Badger Farm, the small one, and then I've kept the larger one for me. That's at home.
And so you mentioned imposter syndrome there. Now, what does that mean to you? And when do you still get those feelings now? And third point, if you do, what do you do to overcome them?
I think I'm so lucky to have met and be surrounded by some amazing business owners, and I look at what they do. And they inspire me so much, and I see how much they've achieved and whatnot, that I look at little old Octopus and go, gosh, I try to step back and realise how lucky we are and what we've achieved. And I try not to let it bother me, but I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. In some ways, it keeps me grounded, but it's always nice to hear when these people feel the same. And I think it's just part of having a business, perhaps, and I think there's nothing wrong though with being honest and saying that's where people are. I think it's really good to be able to say so.
What are some of the things that you do to overcome those feelings?
Deep breath, shoulders back, and remind myself why I do it, and that I'm good at what I do, and that the team and the business is very good at what it does, and we deserve to be doing what we do, and we've earned the right to be doing what we do.
Most definitely.
And that puts a smile on my face and reminds me that there's nothing we can't achieve.
And it just melts away.
Ish. Nearly. Very nearly.
Okay. And so another challenging question. We've talked about your proudest moment with the signage going up. What's been your biggest disappointment so far, if there has been one that you can think of?
When I thought about this is a really challenging question for me, because I don't focus on the negatives. It's just not what we do.
Yeah.
It's really important to recognise them. Where we are today is a reflection on everything that's happened since day one. There have been disappointments, but nothing that's got us down, nothing that has affected where we are today. And so we've learnt people can let you down, but that's just a fact. And I just think, do you know what? We are bigger and stronger and better for everything that's happened. So I don't see any of it as...
And it's an interesting response, because my follow-on question to that would have been, and how did you deal with it? But that response in itself, the fact that you appear to approach everything with a positive frame of mind and look for the good in all situations, whether they're good or bad, is how you overcome the challenges and obstacles and go from strength to strength.
That's a Sarah thing. That's definitely a me thing, is always try and look for the good in people, in the situations. And when you do, and when you really focus hard, then it's very rare there isn't something to take from a situation. And if all that I take from it is I never want it to happen again, well, at least it's finished, it's over, and let's move on. But dwelling on it, we have so much within Juggling Octopus to be grateful for, which sounds really cheesy, but it's true. And we, and therefore we don't focus on things that haven't gone well. We just celebrate. Like I said about the weekly huddle, the first question every week is, what's been the toughest thing this week? What's been the hardest thing? Okay, so what do we learn and what do we do differently? And then we move on.
You take something from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a business owner, what do you think is people's biggest misconception about being in that position?
I think people think they need to know everything. What I've realised is, A, I don't need to know everything, and B, I don't need to learn everything either. What I need to do is to surround myself with the right support network and people that I can go to and can ask for help in the same way that they can always come to me. And that actually makes both myself and the business a whole lot stronger. And the minute I stopped worrying about needing to do it all myself, life became a whole lot easier. Ask for help. Certainly for me, the instances where I've reached out on LinkedIn and the support has been overwhelming. And actually it's introduced me to some fantastic people that I'd never have met. If you don't ask for help, then you're never going to get it. And I always just think if someone asked me to help, how would I feel? Not a problem. If I can't help, then I'll say so, but I'd never be bothered that someone asked.
What have been some of the bigger surprises about being a business owner?
I very naively did not realise how much time it would take to set up a business.
Okay.
I don't know why I thought it would be something that was quicker or took less time. And I'm probably glad I didn't know that. One of my key reasons for setting up the business was to spend more time with friends and family who have forgotten what I look like. But I will rectify that eventually.
How has that panned out?
Yeah, that's really good. That's going really well for me. I wouldn't change it, but it's tough. Setting up a business is tough. And if nothing else, simply because however good you are at the product or at making the product you sell or delivering the services you offer, those foundations, those checklists, those processes aren't in place. And so it just takes a lot more time than I suspect I could ever have imagined.
Yeah, so there's been some big sacrifices made, especially when you talked about just a moment ago that the purpose of the business was to be able to spend more time with family and friends. Obviously, that's gone in the opposite direction, as it has with everybody that I've spoken to so far. How do family and friends approach that with you? Do they, for want of a better phrase, do they take offence to the fact that you're not spending as much time with them, or do they understand that you're in the process of building a business and that when you have the time you will commit it to them?
I'm very, very lucky. My friends and family are behind me 100% and incredibly supportive in terms of, well, if I can't go out for a meal, then they've offered to come and help in the office instead. So no, I'm very lucky that they don't take offence, thankfully. But I also recognise that I need to make time because I'm not indispensable and life is short. We don't know what's around the corner. And actually, there is a balance to be found. There will always be more to do in a new business. And I could sit in the office 24 hours a day and still find things to do in 6 months. And so I think there is just a very fine balance between putting in the right amount of time to get it right and making sure you enjoy everything else as well.
And had you known the effort that it was going to take at the beginning, would you have still made the jump?
I suspect so.
Okay,
maybe-ish. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a roller coaster. Some of the highest highs and lowest lows, but an incredible journey, and I certainly wouldn't want to get off.
My last couple of questions now as we just get to the end of this interview, which has been amazing. I've learned so much myself. I've already made some notes mentally that I'm going to get onto straight away when we're finished. But if you could go back to 21-year-old Sarah and pass on one piece of advice, you've already said you won't change anything about the business per se, but what would that piece of advice be to your younger self?
Have more confidence in yourself. You can do it. And having self-confidence is huge. It's amazing to have the support from people around you, but you can do anything that you set your mind to.
And you truly believe that?
Absolutely. I can't think of the name of the woman, but there's a woman in America, podcast, and she talks about there is nothing I cannot do. And that's my mantra.
Okay. And what does the future look like for you and the Juggling Octopus team?
The future is definitely bright. We have a fantastic team of people who are the right people in the right roles, doing the right thing. And what that means is the future is about growth. It's about consolidating and keeping working with the amazing clients we've got. But we're now in a position to really start finding new and different clients. And that just opens more doors. I would like, the team are excited about the idea of growing and growth, and that's key for us. And so watch out, Derby.
And so you mentioned there that you're looking for different types of clients. Is there an avatar of a client that you look for in particular? Is it a particular sector, a particular size, a particular location? If you could pick a perfect type of business, who would it be?
We don't have a perfect business. We work with businesses that are turning over multi-millions, that are based in London, that are very consultant-based. We work with one-man band startups, literally less than 3 months old. We work with e-commerce businesses. We work with marketing agencies. We work with all sorts. what's more important is the people that we don't want to work with. And it's those people who don't recognise the value that remote working can offer, those people that aren't prepared to delegate, those people that need to micromanage, and that's fine, but they're not the clients for us. So we're excited to see what's out there. As I say, we are open to all sorts of opportunities, and we've been so lucky to have such varied clients to date that we couldn't have imagined working with. And so that's much more important than sort of in terms of just recognising what's not right for us and being open to looking at what people want.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of people talk about defining your target customer, but you rarely hear about defining who you don't want to work with as well, which has obviously worked well for you guys at Juggling Octopus. So you've already secured the work from some amazing clients. You've got some great businesses that you work with. You've just moved premises, which is a massive goal ticked off. What's the next BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal for Juggling Octopus? Do you have one?
I think the key for us now is to take it to the next level. So at the moment, it's still very much that I manage most of the client situations. And the exciting opportunity now is for us to develop client managers and to develop teams that look after businesses independently of myself and Beth. And that's something within the next 12 months that will become much more part of the business model, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like
to almost be able to see how, absolutely, and just to see how people can take more ownership and responsibility, and we can develop them within the business as well as developing the business.
And we'll wrap things up there. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time out to share your business expertise and experiences with us today. And I'd like to wish you and the rest of the team at Juggling Octopus a very bright future.
Thank you.
And to our audience, thank you for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you soon on the next episode of The Truth About Business. One final thing before you go. If you enjoyed this interview and want to make sure you don't miss out on the next episode with another real-life business champion, make sure you subscribe via iTunes, Spotify, your favourite podcast app, or by visiting my blog at benjaminbrain.co.uk and hitting subscribe. At the blog, you'll also find the show notes to this episode, which includes all the relevant links to the website, social media channels, contact details, and anything else that was discussed in the episode. Just type in the name of the guest, and that will bring that right up for you. And finally, I'm always on the search for great business owners who would be happy to spare just a couple of hours of the time to share their business experience with our audience. So if you know of anyone that would make a great guest, or you'd like to feature yourself, just let me know. Send an email to hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk and I'll reply personally as soon as possible. Also, if you've got any feedback, questions that you'd like me to ask our guests, or any other suggestions, I am definitely all ears. That email address again is hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk. So that's it for this episode. I just want to thank you sincerely for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay hungry, stay fearless, get out there and make it happen.